Would you let your daughter walk to the corner for just a few minutes? On a quiet street, in broad daylight, with neighbors all around, everything seems safe. Until something slips out of control. What happens when time seems to stop? And a few seconds change a family forever. When there are no screams, no witnesses, no traces, only silence. And the feeling that something is deeply wrong. But no one can explain what. This story starts like any other. But it ends where logic no longer applies. If that already gave you chills, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear might change the way you see even the most ordinary street. It was an ordinary day in Bellevue, Arizona, a town marked by dry weather, wide streets, and a peaceful routine. It was January the 2nd, 1999, and 11-year-old Lara Klein was standing in front of her house with her younger sister, waiting for the ice cream truck. A simple and joyful end-of-day tradition. Lara was a lively, creative girl who loved drawing and music. The anticipation of her favorite ice cream was part of that almost childlike ritual of pure happiness. The sound of the truck's bells could already be heard in the distance, and both girls waited eagerly at the end of the sidewalk. Lara's bike was positioned just like always, standing beside her, her hands firmly gripping the handlebars. It was just another quiet day, or so it seemed. Lara's sister, for a brief moment, went back inside to grab a jacket. She was gone for less than 2 minutes. When she returned, everything had changed. Lara was gone. Her bicycle lay in the middle of the street, one of its wheels still spinning. The coins she had been holding to buy her ice cream were scattered on the ground, as if they had fallen during a sudden movement. The silence was absolute. There had been no screams, no strange noises. Her sister, confused, called out Lara's name a few times. No answer. Panicking, she ran into the house to call their mother. That moment would mark the beginning of one of the most mysterious disappearances in US history. Lara's mother burst out of the house, screaming her daughter's name as she ran down the street, banging on neighbors' doors, looking in every direction. Nothing, no answers, no signs. People began emerging from their homes, alarmed by the chaos unfolding. Lara had vanished, quite literally, into thin air, in broad daylight, in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Minutes later, the police were called, and the street was quickly cordoned off. Officers asked the first round of questions, examined the bicycle, and collected the coins. It was hard to accept that something so serious could have happened in such a short span of time. But from the very beginning, one thing was clear. Lara hadn't wandered off. She had been taken, and taken so quickly and silently. It almost seemed impossible. From that moment on, every second seemed to weigh tons. The investigation began immediately, and the search for Lara would become one of the most intense and prolonged in the region. The disappearance scene defied logic. How could someone act with such precision in a visible location with houses all around, without leaving any trace? The interval between the last time she was seen and the time she disappeared was about 90 seconds, a minute and a half, enough time to eat ice cream or to disappear forever. There was no screaming, there were no traces, there were no witnesses. It was as if suddenly the world had hit a pause button and Lara had simply disappeared from reality. The news of Lara Klein's disappearance spread like wildfire. In less than an hour, the entire street was filled with neighbors, police, and onlookers. The mother, in tears, tried to mentally retrace every second of the afternoon, as if she could find an explanation in some detail. But there was nothing. The street was familiar, the neighbors were the same as always, and the time. Between the last time they saw Lara and the moment they noticed her absence was too short. Everything seemed to conspire with a single thought. Someone took her. and whoever did it acted with frightening speed and precision. Police cordoned off the block within minutes. Yellow ribbons, sniffer dogs, and search teams began searching every corner of the surrounding area. Trees, drains, cars, yards, roofs. Helicopters with thermal cameras flew over the region. It was a mobilization worthy of a high-risk kidnapping because deep down, the agents knew the more time that passed, the lower the chances of finding Lara alive. The hope of the first few minutes was soon replaced by a cold, methodical urgency. It was necessary to act quickly, and yet everything remained silent. The bicycle, lying on the ground, was treated as a crime scene. The forensic team collected fingerprints, took photos, and marked the position of every object. The coins were picked up using gloves, but nothing indicated violence. There were no scratches on the handlebars, no signs of a struggle. The slowly spinning wheel was described by one of the officers as time in motion, an image that would remain etched in everyone's memory. The search continued through the night. Volunteers walked through nearby trails with flashlights, while others went door to door, asking if anyone had seen a blonde girl, thin, with large eyes and a curious expression. Everyone gave the same answer: "We didn't see anything." As the hours passed, fear began to spread. Not just fear for Lara's life, but something deeper. The fear that it was possible to vanish from such a normal place without leaving a trace. The Klein family's home turned into an improvised operations center. TVs stayed on with live updates, journalists crowded outside, and relatives from other neighborhoods arrived seeking answers. But nothing surfaced. It felt as though the person responsible was already far away. Or worse, still, nearby, watching everything unfold, blending in among the worried faces without raising a single suspicion. The first days of the investigation were intense, but soon hit a distressing obstacle: the complete lack of solid leads. No neighbor had seen anything suspicious. No security camera captured any unusual activity. No tire tracks, no footprints, not even an unusual noise. It was as if Lara Klein had simply evaporated into thin air. The police began reviewing escape routes, questioning delivery drivers, and cross-referencing vehicle records from that afternoon. But nothing stood out. Every trace, every possibility led to the same conclusion: absolute emptiness. In one of the first interviews with local residents, a delivery man claimed to have seen a man standing near a tree just minutes before the disappearance. He described him as wearing a baseball cap and jeans. The description was vague, but it was enough to launch the first line of investigation. Composite sketches were created based on his testimony and distributed to the press. Police believed it could have been an opportunistic predator, or worse, someone who had been watching Lara for days. However, the investigation stalled when no other neighbor could confirm seeing the man. The lack of a detailed description turned the sketch into just another ghost. Federal agents were eventually brought into the case. The possibility of an organized child abduction network was considered, but soon dismissed due to a lack of evidence. The family's home was thoroughly searched, and all members were interviewed, including the younger sister, not as a suspect, but in the hope of retrieving some hidden memory. Nothing surfaced. Investigators reviewed Lara's school records, recent conversations, and any behavioral changes. Lara was a stable, well-adjusted child, with no history of running away or trauma. That only made everything more terrifying. She had no reason to disappear. With no answers, doubts began to grow within the police force itself. Could the culprit be hiding in plain sight? Was it someone from the neighborhood who knew the family's routine and struck at exactly the right moment? The once close community now viewed one another with suspicion. The absence of a face, a suspicious car, a forgotten object at the scene, it all fed into a silent but growing theory. Perhaps Lara's disappearance wasn't random at all. Perhaps it was the plan of someone who knew how to erase every trace and escape unnoticed in just a minute and a half. As the weeks went by, Lara Klein's case slowly faded from front-page news and became one of those stories everyone knows, but no one dares to speak of anymore. The lack of progress made everything unbearable. Emotionally drained, the family refused to give up. Her mother kept the house open, waiting at any moment for a miracle. Her father, who had previously appeared strong, began to speak less and withdrew from everyone, avoiding cameras, reporters, and even the neighbors. Every evening, as the sun set, they lit a candle on the front porch, a ritual of hope that felt more painful with each passing day. The police still received phone calls daily. Most of them led nowhere. People claimed to have seen Lara in grocery stores, parks, even in other states. Each new lead sent the parents on an emotional roller coaster, swinging between hope and heartbreak. One tip described a girl getting into a dark car in a nearby town. Officers rushed to the location, only to find out it was another child. The disappointment was so crushing that Lara's mother once said, "The worst part isn't the absence. It's the constant rise and fall of broken hopes. It's waking up every day and not knowing if you're still a mother." Despite the lack of evidence, investigators continued to explore every possibility. A criminal profile was developed by FBI specialists, a methodical, silent abductor, familiar with the area. But the profile didn't lead to any names. It was like sketching the face of a shadow. Over time, the investigation lost momentum, resources, and media coverage. The case was far from closed, but in practice, it was frozen. And in the absence of movement, the family's pain became unbearably stagnant, as if time had stopped at the exact moment the bicycle wheel stopped spinning. The national media eventually pulled back. The public seemed to lose interest. Lara's case was replaced by other crimes, other tragedies. But for the Kleins, everything still felt painfully alive. The girl's bedroom remained untouched. The drawings Lara had made in her final days were still on the refrigerator, held by colorful magnets. With every birthday, every holiday, her absence became heavier, more real than any memory. And through tears and silence, the family learned a cruel lesson. Disappearance doesn't fade with time. It simply becomes a permanent hole at the center of the lives of those left behind. As months turned into years, Lara Klein's case began to attract not only investigators, but also opportunists, fanatics, and the morbidly curious. Psychics from across the country sent letters and recordings claiming to know the girl's whereabouts. Some said she was alive in another state. Others claimed she had been taken by a secret organization. None of these revelations had any foundation. Still, the family clung to every detail, holding on to even the smallest chance of finding Lara. The cruelest part was the endless cycle of hope and heartbreak. Every strange call reignited both faith and pain. One day, an anonymous letter was left in the Klein's mailbox. In it, someone claimed to have taken Lara and included intimate details about the scene of the disappearance. The handwriting was shaky, the content disturbing. Police treated it as a possible confession, but soon discovered that the writer was a mentally unstable man with no connection to the case. Even so, the incident left a deep scar on the mother, who later said, "The cruelty of someone who lies is almost as violent as the one who took my daughter." Over the years, dozens of similar messages would arrive, none of them real. Meanwhile, darker theories began to circulate in forums, radio shows, and independent documentaries. One of the most discussed was the possibility of child trafficking, that Lara had been taken on commission by a group operating in low-surveillance suburban areas. Another theory pointed to the idea that the abductor could have been someone from the neighborhood itself, someone who knew the girl's habits and knew that her sister would walk away for just a minute or two that afternoon. That thought brought a deep discomfort to the residents. What if the person responsible had never left? Despite the pain, Lara's parents never dismissed a single lead. They traveled to neighboring states after tips about a girl resembling their daughter being seen at a fair, in a hospital, even on a highway. Every time, they returned home with no answers, but they refused to give up. It was as if they had been condemned to relive that day forever, always returning to the bicycle lying on the ground, the wheel slowly spinning, and the empty space where their daughter used to be. Each new theory, each new false alarm reopened the wound, but it also renewed their vow. They would keep searching, no matter how long it took. Decades have passed since the day Lara Klein disappeared, but for her family, time never moved forward. The house where she grew up still has the same number on the door, the same garden out front, and the same bicycle, now rusted, stored in the garage. Lara's bedroom has been preserved as if she might return at any moment. Her drawings are still on the walls, her clothes folded neatly in the dresser, her books lined up on the shelf. Nothing seems to have aged. It's as if everything is frozen in time, trapped in an eternal January 2nd. For the Klein family, Lara didn't become part of the past. She became a permanent absence. Although the case was officially archived after years without progress, it is still remembered as one of the most puzzling disappearances in recent US history. In crime forums, amateur investigators continue to propose theories, revisit old testimonies, and reanalyze every detail of the scene. Documentaries, podcasts, and true crime series frequently mention Lara's story as a chilling example of how someone can vanish, even in plain sight. The question remains, how is it possible that in broad daylight, with alert neighbors and immediate searches, a child can disappear without leaving a single trace? In more recent years, facial age progression technology has been used to generate images of what Lara might look like today. These images have been circulated in social media campaigns and news reports, with the goal of reigniting interest in the case and uncovering new leads. Some tips did come in, but none were confirmed. Even so, Lara's mother continues to believe her daughter is alive somewhere, perhaps unaware of who she truly is. As long as there's no body, there's hope, she always says. For Lara's parents, believing is an act of resistance against oblivion. It's the only way they know how to keep breathing. Today, Lara Klein's name echoes like a collective scar, a painful reminder that not even childhood is safe from the dark. Her face still appears on missing person walls. Her story is told in schools as a warning, and her family continues to wait, not just for justice, but for a closure that may never come. Because some disappearances defy logic, science, and faith, and some silences scream louder than any words ever could. Lara Klein has not been forgotten. She is remembered every time a parent hesitates before letting their child cross the street alone. Because deep down, everyone knows what happened to her could happen to anyone.